In 1900, a Greek sponge diver named Elias Stadiatis came up from 45 meters of cold black water off the island of Antikythera. He was terrified. There were bodies down there. Bronze bodies. He thought he had found a graveyard. What he had actually found was the wreck of a Roman-era cargo ship, 2,000 years on the seafloor. Over the next year, divers brought up marble statues, gold jewelry, coins, amphorae, and one corroded lump of green bronze the size of a shoebox that nobody knew what to do with. It would take 100 years to figure out, and what it would tell us is that some Greek workshop around the 2nd century before Christ built a machine that the rest of human history would not match for 1400 years, and then we lost the recipe. The corroded lump is now called the Antikythera mechanism. It is the most sophisticated mechanical object ever recovered from the ancient world. Inside it, over 30 interlocking bronze gears, some with more than 200 teeth, machined tolerances we did not think were possible before the Industrial Revolution. The mechanism tracked the position of the sun, the moon, the 5 planets the ancient Greeks could see, the timing of eclipses, the 4-year cycle of the Olympic Games, and the 19-year cycle that governed every major ancient calendar. It is, in every meaningful sense of the term, the world's first computer. And nothing else like it appears anywhere in the human record for the next 1400 years. The question is, how was it built? And why did we forget? The 1900 expedition was the largest underwater archaeological recovery of its era. The Greek government commissioned the divers. The artifacts went to the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. Statues, coins, the lump. For 2 years it sat in storage, ignored. Then in 1902, an archaeologist named Valerios Stais took a closer look. He noticed a gear wheel embedded in the corrosion. He said out loud in a published paper, "I think this is some kind of mechanical device. Possibly a clock. Possibly an astronomical instrument." The scientific community of 1902 laughed at him. Greeks did not build clocks. Greeks did not build precision gear assemblies. Greeks did philosophy. The lump was placed back on a shelf. There it stayed for 50 years. There's a particular irony to imagining a 1902 archaeologist confidently explaining what the ancient Greeks could and could not have built. In 1951, a British historian of science named Derek de Solla Price arrived in Greece. He had heard about the lump. He was the first researcher in 50 years to take it seriously enough to ask the museum if he could study it. They said yes. He spent the better part of the next 2 decades on it. His first move was to do something nobody had done before. He X-rayed the fragments. The X-ray images of 1959 were grainy, low contrast, hard to interpret. But they showed gears. Gears inside gears. 30 of them, at least, that he could count. Price published his findings in Scientific American in June 1959 under the title, An Ancient Greek Computer. The scientific community was no longer laughing, but it was not yet listening either, because Price's X-rays were too unclear for anyone to verify what he was claiming. Many scholars suspected the gears were modern, that the device had been added to over time. Others suspected Price himself was reading too much into the images. For another 45 years, the truth of the mechanism sat between believers and skeptics, and the mechanism itself sat in the museum, corroding slowly. In 2005, the Antikythera Mechanism Research Project arrived in Athens with a truck-sized industrial CT scanner, the kind aerospace companies use to inspect jet engine parts. They put the fragments through it. The resolution was sub-millimeter. For the first time in 2,000 years, somebody could see inside the mechanism. What they saw broke the academic argument open in 3 months. There were 37 gears. The largest had 223 teeth. Others had as few as 15. The ratios between the gears precisely modeled the position of the sun, the position of the moon, the timing of solar and lunar eclipses, and the 4-year cycle of the Olympic Games. The inscriptions visible in the scan, readable for the first time, included a glossary of the astronomical events the mechanism tracked, written in classical Greek of the 2nd century before Christ. This was no medieval edition. This was no modern fraud. This was, exactly as Price had argued in 1959, an authentic Greek computer, older than Christ, older than the Roman Empire, older, in fact, than the lifetime of Julius Caesar. Here's what the gears tell us. Whoever built this knew that the moon's orbit around the Earth is elliptical. They knew the moon speeds up at perigee and slows down at apogee. They modeled it with a pin and slot mechanism that introduces precisely the right variation in the gear ratio at the right time of the lunar cycle. This was thought to be a Newton-era discovery. Whoever built this mechanism knew it 1800 years before Isaac Newton was born. We do not know with certainty who built the Antikythera mechanism. The inscriptions on the fragments use a Greek dialect associated with Rhodes, a center of astronomical scholarship in the 2nd century before Christ. The astronomer Hipparchus worked at Rhodes during that period. He was the first person we know of to map the night sky with mathematical precision. He was the first person to discover the precession of the equinoxes. He understood the moon's elliptical orbit. He had the knowledge to design this device. Whether Hipparchus himself made it, or whether one of his students did, or whether it was made by a workshop tradition that traced back to the even earlier work of Archimedes, we do not know. What we do know is this. The Roman orator Cicero, writing in the 1st century before Christ, describes a similar mechanism. He says it was made by Archimedes. He says it showed the position of the sun, the moon, and the planets. He says it was, in his opinion, the most ingenious object ever built by human hands. The ship that carried the Antikythera mechanism sank around 65 years before Christ. It was on its way, almost certainly, from Rhodes to Rome. It was, almost certainly, a piece of looted high-status property being shipped to a Roman buyer. It went down in a storm, somewhere off the island of Antikythera, and then it waited. The Antikythera mechanism was not a one-off freak. It was clearly the product of a workshop tradition. The Cicero passage tells us he had seen something like it. There must have been many of them, or at least there must have been people alive in the 2nd and 1st centuries before Christ who knew how to make them, and then there were not. The skill required to design this thing is so specific that it lives in maybe a handful of people at any one time. A master craftsman, his 2 or 3 best students, their workshop, their tools, their drawings, which were almost certainly never published outside the workshop because they were a trade secret. When the master died, the knowledge migrated to the students. When the students died without students of their own, because Rome had conquered Greece, because the patronage system had collapsed, because the next generation went to Alexandria, and Alexandria slowly burned, the knowledge died. Knowledge does not float. Knowledge has hands and a workshop and a Tuesday afternoon and a chronic backache. When the hands stop, the knowledge stops. By 200 years after Christ, the mechanism was already a curiosity. By 800 years after Christ, it was lost completely. The next time anyone would build something with this much mechanical sophistication would be in southern Germany and northern Italy, in the late 1300s when monks started building cathedral clocks. They thought they were inventing it. So we did not invent the mechanical computer in 1300. We rebuilt it. Some Greek with a beard and a bronze workshop, sometime around the 2nd century before Christ, made something the rest of human history would not match for 1400 years. He died. His apprentices died. The notebooks went to wherever notebooks go. The mechanism went into a ship. The ship sank. The mechanism waited at the bottom of the Aegean for 2,000 years. The day a Greek diver hauled it back up in 1900, we did not understand what we were looking at for another century, and we still do not know exactly who built it. The strangest thing about human knowledge is not what we have. It is what we have already lost. We are not in the 3rd millennium of human progress. We are somewhere in the 2nd great round of it. There were others before us. If you liked the video, consider subscribing.